Hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're looking forward to get started. We're going to give it just a couple of more minutes for any last minute participants to show up, and then we will get started.
All right, I see we've got some folks rolling in steadily here. Just we'll give it another minute or so. We're seeing people pile in, seeing some lovely attendance. Recognize some names in there from our own network. Thanks for showing up today. We're looking forward to sharing some pretty cool stuff here, including some of our findings from some of the companies we work with, and some really good evidence based stuff here. So. Looking forward to getting into that in a second. Probably not going to wait, but maybe another call it 1 or 2 minutes here as people run in, and then we're going to get off to the races. So bear with us just a sec, and we'll get going soon.
Kevin, just out of curiosity, are you still on some coffee or have you moved on to hot tea? I've enjoyed some hot tea as we're getting into some cooler weather.
My wife's the tea drinker. I'm the coffee guy. So I'm definitely, um, you know, I'm in the process of evaluating what I want to do, like coffee wise, in terms of I make all my coffee in a French press right now. It's nice. You get great coffee. But one of my buddies was just espousing the advantages of a timer based coffee, which is, has been around forever. And then Alexander, our co-founder, it was for the audience out there, Casey obviously knows who that is. Alexander is encouraging me to use a smart plug to turn on a water heater so that I can still use the French press, but have the water be hot and ready in the morning, which speeds it up. So there's still some, I don't know. This is the hilarious things we get into as we work from home. Problems I thought I'd never start to explore and solve was like coffee logistics for working from home. But all right,
Yeah.
looks like I think we're ready to get cracking here. So why don't you start us up here, Casey?
Yeah, let's go ahead and kick it off. So thank you everybody for joining us today. We're very excited to get started. This topic, culture building leadership behaviors, it's something that's very near and dear to our hearts here at Rhabit. It's something that we focus on every day and help clients with every day. So we've really been looking forward to this one, and we're glad that you're here with us today. So if this is your first Rhabit webinar, hello, I'm Casey. Webinar veterans might recognize me from some of our earlier episodes. Some things about me recently, I've of course been reading up a lot on the influence of leaders on company culture. So of course to get ready for today's episode, but then just in general as well, it seems to be a hot topic of late. And then a couple of outside of work things about me. I love Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. And my dream trip would be to go to Spain. And my husband has really been teasing me with some amazing pictures off the coast recently. So hopefully he's planning a trip that I don't know about. We'll see. And of course, I have with me today Kevin, who's our co founder and CEO.
Click my unmute thing and then accidentally move the slide forward. So that's really cool. I got to get used to my hotkeys. That's what I need in my life. Yeah. So I'm Kevin. I'm one of the founders here at Rhabit Analytics. You know, uh, Casey came up with these great little icebreakers she loves to use on the webinars, and I like them. A book I'd recommend to anybody that builds product or tries to get their idea across to other people. It's something called Made to Stick by Dan Pink. It gets into some really great concepts of how you can frame ideas that you're trying to communicate to other people, so that they'll stick, so that they'll have meaning to them. It's a very good read. Lately, I've been watching a lot of The Last Dance, so I'm almost done with that series. That catalogs, if you're not familiar, it's a Netflix series, a documentary that catalogs the Bulls during the end of the Jordan era, as they went to three-peat again as champions. So it's a very interesting. I'm a North Carolina boy, born and bred. I'm a Tar Heel, so Jordan, from my alma mater, there's a lot of sort of meaning there for me. Dream trip, I put the British Virgin Islands, and the why behind this is that's where my wife and I had our honeymoon, and it was magical, and we would go back in a heartbeat. So That's that. All right, let's get cracking. That's enough of the intro stuff for me. I'm ready to go.
Let's do it.
So, in terms of the agenda today, what we're going to be doing is getting into kind of just putting some definitions, some boundaries around culture, and what parts of culture we'll talk about, and where we'll focus that. Then we're going to kind of connect that to the idea of leaders and how that intersects with their jobs or duties and how they affect a company. And then we're going to talk about aligning things because, a leader, if you're looking at them as someone who is a transmission belt of your culture, but also the execution arm of your strategy and the implementer of strategy, I guess, how behaviors influence that. And then we'll talk about how you build this and affect it. And we've got a great little use case that we'll take you through as well. So, from here, one thing I just want to kind of give is, the topic of this was around global organizations. And so naturally, in this 30-minute webinar, we're going to teach you how to solve the complex problem of influencing cultures across a global organization, because it's such a tiny and simple idea. Well, obviously being a little facetious, there are complexities to when we talk about the big concept of culture, which are sort of the beliefs and the opinions and conceptualization that people have for the world around them. And that goes deep. There's socio pieces of this. There's family ties. There's where they're from, their background, their education, all these things. That is not really the focus of what we're looking at. We're looking at how, in terms of work, humans at work, how they interact at work, and how they, in a organization, a group of people with a sort of shared goal or part of a shared experience, are trying to achieve something. And so in that context, though, we're gonna keep that global lens here because it is important, and we'll talk about that through some of our examples of how, when you're thinking about a global organization, you might influence that and some of that dynamism that comes there. But first, we're going to reduce this to thinking about a part of the way you can look at culture that permeates all of our companies, that permeates any region, and is the same around within every company, regardless of its size, really, and complexity. And for that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Casey. Why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Kevin. So when we think about company culture, let's start putting a little definition behind it. When we think about company culture, especially here at Rhabit, when we're talking to our clients, we want to root it in this idea of what your employees believe. We talk about culture in the C-suite, we talk about it amongst ourselves in the talent departments, but ultimately it comes down to what your employees believe about which behaviors are rewarded, supported, and expected in your company. And that collection of behaviors that they see being rewarded and supported amounts to your company values and how they think that your company feels they should be behaving on a day-to-day basis. So when we break this idea down, here at Rhabit, we like to call it kind of a behavioral blueprint. So for example, if you say you have a company value of respecting someone's time, what kind of behaviors does that embody? So we like to think of it as behaviors roll up to a value, and then a set of those values become your company's culture. And here's that in action. So when we say we're respectful of others' time, and that's a value we want to instill here at our company, that means that we don't send unnecessary emails after hours, we arrive to meetings on time and prepared, and we share agendas before a meeting. These are observable behaviors that our employees can see happening around them to really instill within them that this is a true value, this is something that we truly believe in, and that we want to see others embody here at our company. We think a really great example of this is Southwest. This is a really lovable brand in more ways than one, but here they have their values listed in precisely this manner, where they have a value and then they have the observable behaviors that support that value. So I'll just hit one here, this warrior spirit. I really love it, especially this year. It could come in real handy, but you strive to be your best, you display that sense of urgency, and you never give up. I think that those are very demonstrable for employees and create this atmosphere of a warrior spirit. Another thing that we've touched on, and of course is entitled by the episode itself, is that culture is shaped by the leaders of your organization. So we see this among the literature of the industry, but founders are the originators of culture. We know that CEOs have a major influence on culture. Whenever you read about leadership and culture, it's always coming from the top down. We have to make sure that our leaders are embodying the values that we want our company to instill upon all of its employees. So this, of course, leads to this idea that culture and engagement can be compromised when leaders aren't reflecting those values. And I have here a few examples of what can happen when your leaders are misaligned. This goes back to the idea of a behavioral blueprint. If your leaders don't have a clearly defined set of behaviors that they know they need to be exemplifying to those around them, then you can just naturally fall out of sync and your culture can be left up at risk. So that's really why we're here today to talk about that blueprint. So we're going to set up the leaders of your company for success with the behavioral blueprint paired with continuous feedback. So what is continuous employee feedback? If this is your first time with Rhabit, I really want to kind of root us in this idea as well. It's everything that we're about. A continuous feedback strategy encourages consistent communication around an employee's growth. It leans upon this idea of how we learn as humans. And that is, since we are toddlers growing up through grade school, we're consistently responding to inputs, feedback that our friends are giving us, that our parents are giving us, that our teachers are giving us at school. We're constantly making these tiny little adjustments to our behaviors on a day-to-day basis. And that really shapes who we are and what we know is acceptable and unacceptable in the society that we live in. From a workplace standpoint, Rhabit collects continuous feedback on an employee's behavioral alignment to values. So just like I know it's unacceptable to burp in public and maybe not excuse myself, this continuous feedback that an employee can receive tells them exactly what's expected and what's not okay within their workplace. Here we can see that one example of giving Gabriel continuous feedback would be, does he encourage others to express new ideas, even if the ideas are not fully developed? This comes under his company's value of creating an environment of innovation. And we're going to really dig into this in the coming slides. Rhabit then transforms that feedback data into analytics dashboards and talent management tools. So on the back side, when you have a talent leader who's collecting all of this continuous feedback data, you can really do some amazing things. When you have objective, observable behavioral data, you can compare it to some of the engagement measures and culture measures that you have in place and begin to pull out some insights about your workforce to understand what makes people want to stay, what makes people want to recommend your company to friends who may be out looking for a job, how to make your employees really tick. These are some really interesting data insights that we can pull when we have feedback data paired with all of the other data you have on hand. So one of the things that we did recently was we took our data from one of our clients. So this is real world data. And we said, what is the relationship between an individual behavior and some of these engagement measures that we want to focus on? One of the big findings that came out of that was that when a manager helps his or her team overcome obstacles without taking over the task, that leads to an employee being 39 times more likely to stay at the company. They're less likely to turn over. And that's huge. When you start thinking about, if you know that an employee is 39 times more likely, and you're starting to think about what are the savings of them not turning over and not having to train a new person to come in and take over for them, there's some really actual hard concrete data that you can pull out about the ROI of some of these behaviors within your company. A few more that we listed here. It's not 39, but even an employee being 6 times more likely to stay just by their manager setting clear performance goals for the team. When you start pulling out some of these behaviors and you're matching it to engagement data and some of these other measures that we can record here at Rhabit, you can really start to see how these data points can come alive and kind of direct some of your talent management processes. What's important as we think about culture as well, and Kevin touched on this earlier, was that when you have a global organization with locations spanning the globe, what works in one location isn't always going to work in another. And I think this is a really important point to drive home because we get really caught up in this idea, it's this pie in the sky idea that we're all going to have one organization, everybody working toward the same goal in the same way. And that's not really realistic. You need to adjust your approach based on each culture of your offices. So for instance, what we might see is that some of the behaviors that drive retention may not directly correspond to some of the other measures that we focus on for employees. Perhaps like helping you progress, or I feel I have an opportunity to develop. So something that works over here may not also have the same effect on a different engagement measure. So these are some of the things that we can think about, some of the data points that we can pull across. But now Kevin's going to take us through what a new strategic initiative can look like when you have continuous feedback.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you, Casey, for that. We wanted to frame kind of what we do here at Rhabit with this concept of aligning behaviors and give you a little insight into kind of the lens we put on things and how we view the world and how we leverage that feedback. But now what I want to do is give you something that is a framework that you can apply whether you use us or a different solution or any other approach around how you're measuring things and collecting data. To help you as a senior leader, as a executive in a talent management role, drive a strategy. So let's say we're going to use just a realistic test case, and this is what we encounter actually quite often. Is we come and a conversation I'll always have with VPs of talent and CHROs, et cetera, are sort of like, what is your current strategic priority? What's the number one thing you're going after? And some for companies that have existed for a while, they've been in an existing business model that's sort of well trod, is they're saying, well, right now we really value innovation. We're trying to do the right amount of change to keep up with the market as it moves and as it's disrupted, usually by technology in some way, and really try to adjust that. So how do you actually execute this strategy? And so what we want to do from a talent management perspective is think about that idea of behaviors. What are the things we need to observe that would align with that? So innovation is this big concept. It's this idea of things that are new. That's what is at the root of it. But if we want to break it down into observable behaviors, we might think about things like people, their tolerance for taking risk, the encouraging of new ideas, a tolerance for failure, having opportunities to voice these things, the space to create. There's so many behaviors that would come around that. And if we take the time to really articulate that and come up with a model for the behaviors that we want to see, now we can start to put those into action, right? Now what we can think is, how do I hold somebody accountable that they're actually executing this behavior? And you have a lot of tools in your talent management stack, right? We can do the whole employee life cycle. You can talk about performance management as the system and processes that you'll say, okay, if you have to get feedback with this type of measurement, this process or this approach, and you're held accountable to some level of conformance to those behaviors. We're going to use our PM process to catch that. You might also do it with your leadership development process and your 360 assessments. That may be another place where you're loading up the content, the questions you're asking, the things that you're valuing, the things you're communicating and signaling with these behaviors to see if you're getting data that supports that one, that these are important, and two, that you have some alignment there. You can also do this on the hiring side where you look at your behavioral interviewing, how you set up the interview guides, the things that you value during your selection process. You can even do it on your exit interviews. You can look at your exit interviews and ask to see if people who are leaving your organization, do they give you signals that would be indicative that they feel either aligned or disaligned with that strategy, or seeing that they feel that's part of the company, right? So we look at that, and then as you know, this is really, we're really doing a lot of planning here, you know, that the ideation, the creation of the behaviors, the architecting your processes, you'll work with your stakeholders to think about all the different ways you can do this. And then as you plan, when you think about communication, big part of change management, classic change management stuff, communicate, communicate, communicate. We want to get out there and say, okay, guys, the strategic idea here is innovation. Here is the why behind this. You want to position it from as high at the top down as you can get it. Always look for executive sponsorship in any new strategy piece. Say this, get the CEO to talk about it, to bring it up in a town hall, to email people about it. And then look at your talent organization from your HRBPs and your people who are close, especially in a global organization. Involve them in the discussion and the planning process. Bring them in to validate whether they think those behaviors are valid, to validate whether they think this process is effective, to understand what tools they're using. Would your processes that you're envisioning fit these things? Do you need to change stuff? By involving those folks in a global organization that really are boots on the ground in those locales, you're going to be able to avoid some larger pitfalls. And then you can also use this when you're thinking about the rate at which you roll this out, because there will be no snapping your fingers and creating an innovative culture. This is going to be a slow change that's very purposeful and planful. And it's very important that we do this work by involving all these stakeholders to have a better outcome. So sort of the next piece is, and you're going to activate and measure. And guys, if you do one thing, please measure. Figure out ways to get data. Survey things. Look at systems and processes that are set up to collect data. Look at ways you're going to understand the effects of all of this planning and process that you're going to put in. What are the metrics that matter? What are the things, and then how do they change as we go into that? This is a way for you to then communicate to the organization how things are going, to hold people accountable, which is higher accountability results in more effective strategic change. Okay, and so if we wanted to make our company more innovative, we need to measure things so we can then come back and hold and create that accountability and that transparency for the organization. Okay, and then kind of the last piece is, now that you'll start to measure and you get the baseline of where you are, you start to see where it's moving, you're going to iterate. This, again, it's going to be something that you roll out purposefully, potentially slowly, and the way you roll it out in one sort of pilot location, you'll learn some things and you can apply that. And sort of being very planful, but making sure that you have good measurement through this, I think, is a very key for your success. Let's say that we were going to go this route. It's like innovation is the thing we're going to nail. Like that's going to be our strategic initiative. So let's look at some of the values. So the idea of someone being innovative is admittedly a bit of a latent construct. You really can't judge whether a person is innovative. I can't look at somebody on the street and figure out if they're innovative. What I need to observe are some of their behaviors around this. And so for an individual, it might be as simple as that they come up with ideas, that you see them produce ideas. They're willing to challenge things. Again, back to that risk taking. They'll challenge an existing process without being prompted. That is a wonderful signal that you have a culture that's open to innovation. You can even ask people in either your engagement measurements or something like Rhabit, whether they feel like they have an opportunity to be considered when they present a new idea, because this will be connected to the idea of their willingness in a way, which is fascinating. So we've got a couple of behaviors for this individual, but then there's going to be other behaviors for the managers. Again, different role. You're no longer producing things at some individual quality. A lot of times the manager is coordinating the work of others. They're delegating, they're providing feedback, they're aligning folks. So for them, they want to, we may want that they want to, and excuse me, I was all over the place with the words there. We want them to inspire that innovation, to be part of the genesis of this and to support it. So this might be, again, articulating it in clean behaviors. They invite people to share new ideas, actively pulling from their folks, making them feel like their opinion is wanted, that their ideas are wanted. They create an environment where they feel comfortable. That comfort will probably come from things like they hear out the idea, and if they have something negative to say about it, they approach that person individually, and that they praise them for bringing it up. Another piece that we love to talk about too is when things fail. When someone tries a new approach or process, cheering on that they had the courage to challenge it and that they failed and that we learned from that is a much healthier environment, so that people will produce new ideas, new approaches, and continue to really try to be innovative, to try to challenge things without feeling like, you know what, I failed, I tried, I'm out, I'm done, this isn't for me. And then, the highest level of the org, the executives, right? They need to lead that innovation. They need to live it and show it, right? So this comes from like the people when you're in an executive role. I know this firsthand. People pay attention to what you say. You have to be very thoughtful and calculated in the things you say, and the things that you repeat the most will stick. Coming back to my book, I like things that stick. Repetition of short, simple ideas will stick in people. So just beat things to death. If it is an important strategic priority, that you just have to stay on top of it. And then it's about allocating resources. That resource may be capital, that resource may be time, it may be priority, it may be the amount of time you talk about it relative to other things when you're in say strategic meetings, when you're in board meetings, when you're in a town hall, right? And then that value really is that context and that why that people will crave, that feel like giving them the why, that contextualizing why we're focusing on this is something that will foster buy-in. It builds trust in the idea, and it'll pull people closer to that. And then as you're thinking about measuring the culture, measuring the pieces of how people perceive the work environment, right? If I'm looking for a company that values innovation, maybe I'm a job seeker that's thinking about their Glassdoor reviews or looking at some other piece, and I'm thinking about being there. You know, the signals you would want to be able to collect in your process when you're asking folks what they think about working at your company, and then broadcasting those out to the market might be things around this, where you're saying, if you had really good feedback around that your company rewards those who innovate, right? My company, they feel comfortable sharing innovative ideas. And you've got so much action that you can take if you are measuring these things. Because if you get negative scores, now you programmatically know what you should focus on when you want to say, look at maybe we see something with innovative rewards innovation right there. So that there might be a compensation component of this, right? There may be some new program, some new L&D initiative. The things, the things you will always pull, the levers you will pull in a strategic role for a talent manager are processes, right? And procedures and policy. And so these are the places where you're looking in those signals for which processes you should change, which you should keep, which you should throw out, and policy and procedure of how they connect to these ideas. At Rhabit, this is what we do. So this is kind of how we take you through these cards. For us, it happens as simple as a very simple exercise where you get a little deck of cards of these every week, and they're going to be focused on the things that the company needs to measure to drive that alignment and drive that effect in the population that matters. And it may be leaders, it may be everybody. It's all about what you're trying to execute and where we sort of fit into that cycle, but it's about the measurement. You need to capture the data to understand how it moves forward. And so one last thing I want to show here is I need to shift my little control thing here, and I'm going to pull up. I want to show you guys kind of a real world scenario of what this looks like through some of our data. So this is what I've got turned on here is our little analytics dashboard. It's part of the analytics tools that come with Rhabit. And this is an example of one that we put in place. We anonymized and changed the names of the folks here, but this is coming from one of our real data sets. We took a baseline here where we had an initial measure where we're asking questions on those cards about people's perception of their managers and how around those behaviors holistically that are clustered up in innovation, right? And we get that sort of baseline here. And now we're starting to change. 6 weeks has gone on. Now, let me tell you, in a global organization, 6 weeks from an initiative start to a measurement point is a pixel of time. But it's important because if we can get in front and look at these signals right out of the gate and then continue to measure and continue to monitor, this is a way better chance that we're successful in fully implementing this than if we wait to measure it again with, say, an annual survey, or we look to, say, an infrequent performance review, or cluster it around development cohorts who are going through maybe leadership assessment things. If we have something that's a little bit more ongoing with a higher resolution, we can really start to understand change. And so here what we have is our I love how in the modern world I sort of point to the screen as if you can see what I'm looking at. But I do have my mouse here to wave around. We have the manager baseline, so where you started from day one. And we can see we've got some folks who were great at that, and we've got some folks on the struggle bus here. And we'll dive into this. And we've broken it down by region here, and then we have the people over here on the side. We also have some important tabs around the executive leaders that are sponsoring this and some overall statistics. But now what we might care about in this is you're starting to think about, all right, 6 weeks in, how's it going? Like we maybe we published a new process. We've had this town hall. We've done things over that month and a half of time. We've taken steps to around this new strategic initiative we've launched, and we want to understand how it's affecting things. And here we're looking at managers. You may, in our world, if you're a Rhabit customer, you'll have data around individuals, managers, whoever. But in this case, for this use case, we're looking right at the managers based in these regions. And so, you're immediately drawn to these lower performer folks like out of the South region. And so looking at the story here, what we're seeing now is they did have a bad baseline. But look, we are seeing some wonderful, nobody is decreasing. This is great. So we're seeing some change. People are giving them feedback on these behaviors after their baseline point. They've maybe gone through some training. They have this executive sponsorship, and we're seeing to the degree of which they've changed. And now what that's telling us from a talent manager's perspective is maybe this is not a region where I need to focus on and pay some attention. This isn't the phone call I pick up and make. So how do we find this? So as we continue to explore, maybe we'll turn back on everybody. And really, maybe it's about the executives that we're looking at, where we're seeing, okay, this one, not so bad. We got some positive growth, really positive here. Find out, like in this case, if you saw this and you see, like I got a 0 point, everybody here grew in this case. Not always the case. But this is a place where in the case where things are good, it doesn't always mean leave it alone. It might mean have a call with this executive and say, what did you do? Like, did you do anything else to support this? Like, have you talked about this? Take me through, because your folks, I'm seeing the leaders under you are really tightly aligned. Talk to me a little bit about your process, et cetera. Make them involved in that thing and have this data point as the reason. It's the why, it's the context. And for that leader to have this good news that you're seeing alignment to this, like they're going to be happy to dig into that with you. You'll build some trust, and you may learn something about their approach, right? Especially if they're in a global organization where you may be distant from working with these people on the regular. And then there may be the opposite, right? Like there may be folks like our manager Hashimoto here, who works with some folks out of the North and East region, where you're headed down. You had decent baselines, but you're actually getting worse. You're getting worse. Now, what happened? Is it, and that is, we're 6 weeks in to a strategic change. So it's really, it's a good place to watch it, ask questions, figure out if you want to die on a hill or pick a fight. But we know the difference is now that we have the measurement underneath this, and it's about behaviors, the things people do, and the signal where people are saying, I see these people do this and they're aligned to this. It's so much more compelling and helpful in how it's anchoring around this strategic priority. So I just kind of wanted to give you a taste of some of the analytics that we deliver as part of the platform here in the context of a very real strategic initiative that we've encountered in the wild and that we've been helping one of our customers tackle. So with that, I'm going to switch over my share here and give that back to Casey. So we can find out where we were. I think where we last left, folks, here, and switch that to here. And then I'll hand it over to you, Casey, to talk about what's next.
That sounds great. So first, what's next is there have been some really great questions coming through the chat. So if you haven't seen those yet, pop on over there. I think Jacqueline really brought up a great point of how this can be used from an L&D standpoint as well. So I know we're talking about leadership development. When we're talking about trying to develop behaviors and measuring them, this is a perfect use case for that. So good eye there, Jacqueline. What's next for you? There are several opportunities right now. If you're looking to learn maybe more about continuous feedback or more about this idea of a behavioral blueprint, we have several resources available for you. We have our wonderful monthly newsletter that can be reached right there at that link. And then we have 3 other options there for you to check out as well, maybe some good weekend reading.
And we're sending the deck, so you will have access to the links. Obviously, that link is not useful to you in this webinar. You will have the link. We will, since you've attended, you will get that. So you'll have all that stuff there for those resources.
That's right. And then if you're ready to if you want to maybe see how this can be evolved for your organization, we always create tailored, customized demo experiences for folks. So we'd love to do that for you. Just send us over an email. You will probably be talking with Hillary, who's working the chat right now. and she would be happy to help you along. But otherwise, we're about 4 minutes over. So thank you so much for joining us. We've really enjoyed it. And yes, please help yourself to the chat if you have more questions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, have a wonderful weekend.
And you guys can always reach out to us for anything. We love to talk shop anytime about talent management. So even if it's a thing where you're asking about one of these strategic approaches or your own, even if you're not in the market for stuff, if there's something where we can be helpful in our knowledge, our background as organizational psychologists and technologists and people who are in here really focusing on shaping employee behavior and aligning leaders to that behavior, if there's something that we can be useful as a resource for you, please reach out. We would rather build a meaningful relationship with you through that experience than sell you anything any day of the week, because that's the kind of company we run here. Really appreciative of you guys taking your time and coming on yet another webinar in a world where there's a sea of webinars right now. Thank you so much for being part of this and sharing it with us, and we'll wish you a great week moving from here.